Welcome to Just a Minute. My name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure to welcome the four diverse personalities who are going to play Just a Minute. We welcome back three regular players of the game, Paul Merton, Derek Nimmo and Peter Jones, and someone who's only played the game once before, that is Stephen Frost. But will you please welcome all four of them? Beside me sits Liz Trott, who is going to keep the score and blow a whistle when the 60 seconds are up. And as usual, I will ask our four panellists to speak, if they can, on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. Let us begin the show with Derek Nimmo. Derek, a crash course. That's the first subject that Ian Messett has come up with. Would you talk on it starting now?
When I first took my private pilot's license at Victoria in Australia, I flew out of Moorabbin Airport to Lake Eildon and found myself on a crash course. I buzzed back to control and asked them how I should land. They said, fly over first and mind the rabbit holes and look out for the sheep on the right-hand side.
Stephen, you have challenged.
The accent.
Stephen, no, I don't agree with the challenge, so Derek gets a point for an incorrect challenge. He keeps the subject, and there are 40 seconds left on a crash course starting now.
There were two 747s were on a crash course in Sydney, and one of them pulled to the left and missed...
Paul.
Repetition, 2 747s.
Yes. Well, listen, Paul, a good challenge. 34 seconds, a correct challenge.
Give it to me. All right.
You get a point for that, of course. You take over the subject. 34 seconds, a crash course starting now.
I remember when I took my first driving lesson in 1868.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Deviation impossible, he's not that old.
Well, yes, I don't think he could have done it in the... I don't know, anyway. No, actually, technically, you're right, Derek. So you have a correct challenge, 30 seconds to take back a crash course starting now.
And as the aeroplanes missed each other, they pulled away out of a crash course. And in the Australian next day, it was reported they...
Peter challenged.
Repetition.
Yes, what of, though?
I can't remember now. Something right.
Yes, he did repeat Australia and
Australia,
other...
that's right. That's right.
I didn't.
Got it.
Actually, I said in the Australian, which is a newspaper.
That's right, yes.
You did right, you did, actually, yes.
It was just the pronunciation that was a bit faulty.
Derek, yes, you keep the subject. 11 seconds for you, starting now.
I am taking a crash course in French. Je veux te serrer dans mes bras, je veux être ton amant. I long to hold you in my arms. I want to be your lover, which is not frightfully useful if you meet Paul Merton.
Right, so whoever is speaking as the whistle goes gains an extra point. It was Derek Nimmo, who I don't need to tell you has got the most points at the end of the round. And Paul, we'd like you to begin the next round. Flying saucers. 60 seconds starting now.
Well, a flying saucer landed in my back garden about 19 years ago, and I got on it and went to the planet Venus. And it's true, because I've got photographs here of me standing on the surface of that particular planet. And anybody who says that this is false can come and outside and I'll give them a damn good fight, because I was trapped on that particular orb in space for years. I tried speaking to the Venusians and said, look, it's not my fault I'm here. I was kidnapped by one of your people. They said it's got nothing to do with us. It could have been anybody they picked up. We had Winston Churchill about 30 years ago. And before that, Sir Stanley Matthews, the Wizard of the Wings, spent a fortnight on this very surface. I thought, well, I'm very proud to be in such august company. And they said, so you should be and all. What do you want for your dinner? I said, well, what have you got? They said, well, we can offer you fish cakes if that's not too fantastic for you. I thought it's quite an extraordinary concept, the idea of eating that particular meal out here this far away from the earth where I was originally came from. They said, well, look, do you want it or not? I said, well, it'll be fine. So at that point, they produced a doner kebab, which to all intents and purposes was completely cold. I said, why is this not served up hot? They said, we got it from a shop in the Highgate, and it's a long way away to bring it all the way from that particular part of North London to where we're standing now. I said, OK, I go along with that. What have you got to drink? They said, well, we've got Watney's Red Barrel. I said, oh, that is just too fantastic, because nobody outside of the
Well, just
true.
I know. It's fantastically true. And just to prove that fantasy works, and you're the greatest exponent of it that I know, well done, Paul. Because actually, I took the whistle away from Liz and let you go on for 1 minute, 20 seconds. Stephen Frost, welcome to the show, and will you take the next round? The subject, odd first names. Can you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
When I was at school, there was a boy who was called 3. And that is what I call an odd first name. He also had a brother called 5 and 7. I asked them, why did their parents call you that? It just doesn't add up. There was also a boy called Mallow, his first name being Marsh. The reason he was called this is because he used to like to sit round fires and bake himself towards the flames, which were giving off a lot of heat at the time, obviously, when we went on the field trips with the geography teacher who liked to do that sort of thing. But that's all in the past now, and he's served his time. But there was also a girl I had as a girlfriend at college.
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of girl.
Yes, yes. And all those boys earlier on, too, but didn't bother with that. Paul, a correct challenge. Another point to you, 20 seconds. Odd first names, starting now.
I suppose one of the oddest first names is Adolf. Apart from Hitler of that name, I don't know anybody else that's ever been given it, I suppose. Oh, wait a minute. One of the Marx brothers was called
Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes. Derek, 11 seconds. Odd first names, starting now.
Well, I think Nicholas is a very odd first name. Who would actually, in any sort of wisdom at all, give their child an odd name like that?
If anybody had known, they could have challenged and have said, it's not his first name, it's his second name. I was actually christened Christopher Nicholas.
Not many people know that.
And not many people could care, anyway. Right, so Paul had those 3 points and other points in that round, and he's now equal in the lead with Derek, Nimmo, and Peter Jones. It's your turn to begin. The subject, being laughed at. Can you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
Well, I suppose it's very nice if you're a comedian and you're trying to be funny, because it is really your bread and butter. But if you're trying to be serious and people laugh, then my response to that...
Nimmo's.
Hesitation.
There was an error, Peter, I'm
it
sorry.
was, yes.
49 seconds for you, Derek, to tell us something about being laughed at, starting now.
Well, I quite agree with Christopher Peter Jones. Because
Yes, Christopher.
Well, it's just absolute rubbish.
Absolutely. It's not your first name.
No, it isn't.
And he hesitated as he
it
said
might
it.
have been.
It's not included among my names at all.
46 seconds. You've got the subject back, Peter. Being laughed at, starting now.
Then you have to pretend, if people laugh, to be speaking very seriously. And then it's all right, you see. It's a rather craven way of doing it, I admit. But why go on trying to tell jokes to people who are not amused? And similarly, why go on trying to...
Stephen, you challenge.
Repetition,
The repetition
go on.
of why,
Yes,
yes.
why,
Well
go
done,
on,
yes.
and,
Being laughed at, Stephen. And there are 27 seconds starting now.
There's nothing worse than being laughed at when you shouldn't be.
Paul Merton challenge.
Deviation. Being boiled in hot oil is worse. That's worse than being laughed at when you shouldn't be.
To a comedian, I think they'd rather be boiled in oil. So,
Do you
Stephen,
really?
yes. I know a few
If it
comedians.
gets a laugh, yes.
Yeah, true. Well, if it's the finish of the act, of course.
You can only do it once.
Stephen, I'm going to let you continue. You've got a point there. 24 seconds left. Being laughed at, starting now.
For instance, I went into a pub the other day and decided to relieve myself. I went into the toilet first, naturally. I got into a bit of a fracas inside the toiletry situation, so I walked back out again without doing my flies up. The pub laughed at me.
Paul Merton.
Repetition of pub.
Yes, there's too many pubs, I'm afraid, Stephen. 12 seconds with you, Paul. Being laughed at, starting now.
I suppose one of the saddest stories I know about show business is about the man who went to see the psychiatrist who said...
Stephen,
That's not the saddest story he knows about show business.
he did actually say one of the saddest
he did,
stories,
yes.
yes. So, Paul, another point to you. 5 seconds. Being laughed at, starting now.
This man said, I'm desperately unhappy, and the man that... Oh, no.
Repetition of man.
So ridiculous.
Stephen, you cleverly got it. You're sitting in the chair that Clement Freud usually takes, and you've done a Freud on us. You've got him with 1 second to go. Being laughed at, starting now.
Laughter is...
Paul, challenge.
Hesitation.
No! Another point to Stephen. Half a second on being laughed at, Stephen, starting now.
It was a long...
Right, so at the end of that round, Stephen, Frost was speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point for doing so, and he's moved into third place just ahead of Peter Jones. Derek Nimmo is ahead of them, and 1 point behind our leader, who is now Paul Merton. Derek, your turn to begin, and the subject is an English country garden. Will you tell us something about that delightful subject in this game, starting now?
It always seems rather an irony to me that the song An English Country Garden was written by an Australian called Percy Granger, but never mind. I have a wonderful English country garden, and it is something which foreigners envy us hugely about, particularly, of course, those wonderful beds of Delphinia.
Paul Merton challenge.
Is it a repetition of wonderful?
Yes. 42 seconds, an English country garden, starting now.
There's nothing I like better than walking through an English country garden.
Derek, you challenged.
Vandalism.
He did not establish, Derek.
If he's
how he was-
walking through an English country garden,
You can
he's walking over the
most
path.
English country gardens have paths, so you can still walk through it on the path. He didn't establish he was walking through the flower
Oh, I
beds.
see. A lawn is a garden.
He's part of the garden, and most gardens you can walk on the lawns as well. So he wasn't being a vandal, but it was a lovely challenge. Give him a bonus, go on. He loves getting his points. But Paul also gets a point for being interrupted, keeps the subject, 38 seconds, an English country garden, starting now.
I meander through the rose bushes with heavy boots on and kick them out of the ground because I can't stand these plants. What are they doing there? What's wrong with old-fashioned concrete? It's easy to look after. You just mix it up, pour it out of a bucket on the floor. That's all you need.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
He's not talking about gardens anymore. He's talking about hardcore, as in motorways.
Yes. What he just described, it was not in any stretch of the imagination an English country garden, even in his fantasy world. So, Derek, point to you, 25 seconds, English country garden, starting now.
Lancelot, Capability Brown, Humphrey Repton are two of the great names one thinks of who deposed a French eminence in garden construction in the 18th century. From these great men, we work our way through to the wonderful Miss Jekyll, who created the most glorious English country gardens in a style which has not been surpassed. And I myself, when I wander abroad, I'm very proud to be here.
Derek Nimmo, wandering through his English country garden, kept going to the whistle went, gained an extra point for doing so, and he's equal in the lead with Paul Merton at the end of that round. And Paul, your turn to begin. The subject, cones. Will you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
Apparently, there is now a telephone number you can ring called the Cones Emergency Hotline. I'm not quite sure what this service is meant to provide. Perhaps you're driving down the motorway and you see these cones lining along the actual route that you're taking, and you think to yourself, I wonder how many of them there are. Perhaps I can... Oh, telephone.
So, Stephen.
Hesitation.
Yes. Cones is with you, Stephen. 41 seconds, starting now.
What I like to do is bite the end off them and suck the ice cream through that end. That way, you can enjoy the...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Well, he didn't hear what he enjoyed. They went...
I had a mouthful of ice cream, I couldn't...
The ice cream was dripping over him, as he said. Right. 35 seconds for you on cones, Derek, starting now.
Yes, I liked ice cream cones too. When I was growing up in Merseyside, there were three companies that sold these delicacies. There was Wall's, of course, Eldorado, and Walker's of Merseyside.
Paul Merton.
Repetition of Merseyside.
So, Paul, you have cones back with you. 23 seconds, starting now.
I remember when I was growing up in Merseyside, there was nothing I liked better than to go down to the streets, pick up the cones and suck the ice cream.
Peter Jones' challenge.
He didn't grow up in Merseyside. It's well documented where he grew up.
Yes. In your fantasy world, you may have grown up there, but we know you didn't. So
Well, where did I grow up?
You spent 19 years on Venus.
Well, it made a change from Merseyside.
Peter Jones, 16 seconds for you to tell us something about cones starting now.
I remember the cones they used to sell in the small village where I was brought up, made by Ellis's, and they manufactured the ice cream as well, and they cost a penny. A whole cone full of this wonderful stuff was only 1 guinea.
Derek challenged.
2 ones.
Yes, 1. You tried to change the
Tuppence, a
penny.
tuppenny one.
Derek, you've got it with a second to go on cones starting now.
Samantha Cones, I think, is one of the finest actresses.
So Derek Nimmo was then speaking as the whistle went and gained another point for doing so as well as others in the round, and he's now taking the lead ahead of Paul Merton. Peter, it's your turn to begin. The subject is jacuzzis. Will you tell us something about jacuzzis in just a minute, starting now?
They're rather nice things for relaxing and getting a kind of massage without the aid of a masseur or anybody else who is going to manipulate your limbs and caress you and so on.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
And,
Oh yes, after you mentioned the limbs, you erred.
A bit picky, I thought.
But accurate within the rules, and if they're picky, I've
Yes,
still got to
right,
be
yes,
fair.
we have to
So
be very-
48 seconds for Derek to tell us something about jacuzzis starting now.
the first time I ever went to a jacuzzi was on the North Island, New Zealand. It was quite extraordinary. We'd gone to a kind of cocktail party, or so I thought it was, and they suddenly went down to the roundabout, went to the jacuzzi where the water was agitated, nice and hot it was, and we continued to have glasses of sherry, which I thought was most extraordinary. Actually, the best ones are the natural ones. You get down to Rotorua, Rotorita.
Stephen,
What's the matter?
Repetition of ones. The
yes,
best
there are
ones
too
are
many
the
ones.
natural ones.
The best ones, the other ones.
And they're not jacuzzis, they're natural springs.
I
They're
know,
not-
but you didn't challenge for that, Peter.
Well, I didn't know whether it was strictly within the rules of the game.
You can always chance your arm. But anyway, Stephen Frost, you have jacuzzis. You have 29 seconds starting now.
The first jacuzzi I ever bought was a 3.4 litre fuel injection one. It went like a bomb, which was no good to me because it blew up and I ended up with no car to drive around town. So instead, I bought another one, which was...
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of bought.
Yes, and then one right,
Another one.
Paul. 17 seconds on jacuzzis starting now.
Jacuzzis was the inventor of the Uzi machine gun, which of course is a very popular model amongst terrorists. I don't know where he got the idea from. I believe he was out in the back garden one day.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
We didn't know where he got it from. He got it from Lee Enfield.
I don't know why you're clapping. He's just showing off. Yes, well showed off, Derek. And all right. But it wasn't a correct
Laugh, don't listen
challenge.
to it.
It's a bit of a fantasy idea. Yes, I know, Paul. I'm with you. 6 seconds are left with you on jacuzzi starting now.
The cheapest way to get a jacuzzi is to get a jar of Epsom salt.
Stephen.
Get.
Yes, you were getting too much before. Yes.
Yeah, he'd be get.
Stephen, you've cleverly got him with 2 seconds to go on jacuzzi starting now.
During the French Revolution, the witnesses were called jacuzzis.
Stephen Frost was speaking as whistle went, gained an extra point for doing so. Derek Nimmo and Paul Merton are equal now in the lead, and Derek, it's your turn to begin. Our feathered friends. Will you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
Well, I don't think if I was a bird, I would ever think of mankind as being one of my mates, I can tell you, really. If I was a chicken or a goose or a turkey or
Peter,
a
you
grouse.
challenged.
Nicholas,
said
he
if I-
didn't challenge. Are you going by? Are you like Joan of Arc and hearing voices?
You repeated if I were 3 times.
But
Didn't
you're
you,
not
Peter?
playing the game, Nicholas. You're supposed to be the chairman, Nicholas.
I think you've
And
gone
Pete-
mad, Christopher.
But Peter looked at me. Peter, I'm giving you the subject.
Why, if you didn't challenge? Are we going to have sort of phantom challenges?
This is a new game, sort of psychic challenges.
Yes.
But what's
When-
the point of having buzzers if we don't need them?
Because Peter nodded off for a second. But I should bring you back into the game just for a second.
Yes.
I think so, right.
I appreciate that,
48
yes.
seconds, Peter. Our feathered friends starting now.
Well, a lot of them aren't friends at all. Things like rooks and crows.
Derek Nimmo.
And
Yes. You get another point
I
in
did
doing
actually
so.
make rather mistakes. I buzzed rather than waiting for your fancy.
Actually, I had challenged psychically a second before Derek had pressed his buzzer.
Did you?
Yeah. I'm
Well,
surprised
I'm
you didn't pick up on it, Christopher.
I'm sorry. You weren't on my psychic wavelength, you see.
No.
I'm not in tune with that one. I'm in touch with a different orbit. I'm not on that one. You went way off
I
on your
always,
flying
thought
saucer.
you were on another orbit.
Yes.
You finally admitted it in public.
44 seconds with you, Derek, on our feathered friends starting now.
Christopher Robin, for very obvious reason, is Nicholas Parsons' favourite feathered friend, because they have a great deal in common, and actually I think they have...
Paul Merton, you challenged.
I had a feeling that Peter wanted to challenge.
I did, but you're having trouble with his buzzer, so what was your challenge?
Well, Christopher Robin is a character in Winnie the Pooh. It's not a bird. It's a
That
boy.
is the correct challenge, yes. Paul, you have 33 seconds to tell us something about our feathered friends starting now.
There's nothing I like more than loading up a shotgun, going out on the moors and shooting at the grouse as they fly overhead. It's a damn shame we have to wait till August every year to do this, because I can't stand the little devils. That's about it, really. I didn't think I was going to get that far.
Right. Well, Peter, your buzzer did work then.
Yes.
Well challenged, yes. He hesitated and deviated.
He did.
Yes.
How clever of you to know, Nicholas.
Yes. 24 seconds for you to tell us something about our feathered friends starting now.
He started off talking about Christopher Robin, whom he associates with Winnie the Pooh, apparently. I don't know why. It sounds a strange combination to me, but apparently
Derek
the book
Nimmo
was very
challenge.
successful.
It was me who was talking, not Paul Merton.
That's right. But so
Didn't
what
he
is your other
mention him
challenge?
as well?
Sorry?
He mentioned Christopher Robin.
He mentioned Christopher Robin. If that is your challenge, that's incorrect. 16 seconds for you, Peter, on our feathered friends starting now.
Well, I'm not terribly keen on many of these birds that come into the garden. We have blue jays and magpies lately, and they have ousted all these other tiny little birds, blackbirds and so forth.
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of birds.
Yes, you see, it's feathered friends on the card, Peter, which
So
would
it
have been-
is, yes.
Yes. And, so Paul's got him with 2 seconds to go on our feathered friends starting now. We had a Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
No, of course.
So Paul's got another point, and there's 1 3/4 seconds on our feathered friends starting now.
A budgie called Peter that lived in a cage in the...
Well, a lot of points were scored in that round, and they're all pretty close, but just out in the lead is Paul Merton, just ahead of Derek Nimmo. And Paul, it's your turn to begin. The subject, bulbs. Can you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
I understand that many years ago somebody invented a light bulb that lasted forever, but there was a lot of pressure within the electricity industry to make sure that this product was never released into the shops. So you can understand why. People are much more happier if customers are...
He was stalling and then he hesitated.
So, Stephen, yes, we agree with the challenge. 45 seconds, bulbs starting now.
Take a daffodil bulb, put it in the cellar in some soil and compost, leave it there for 3 weeks and see when the first sprout comes through. There's nothing more enjoyable than seeing the tip.
Paul Merton
This
challenge.
is very bad advice, and it's repetition of seeing.
Yeah,
In any
that's
case,
right.
I think there are things more enjoyable.
35 seconds, Paul. Bulbs starting now.
The bulbs in my back garden would do a lot better if our feathered friends didn't come down and keep eating them the whole time. At the moment,
Stephen Frost.
Deviation, why have you put light bulbs in your back garden? Because that's what you were talking about before.
it helps you to see in the dark.
Actually, Stephen, you haven't played the game very much. You can take the subject in any way you wish, and he wasn't really deviating, so we won't score any points on that. 28 seconds, still with Paul. Bulbs starting now.
And when eventually they come through, I know I will be blessed with an English country garden, and I'll be able to show people around and say, this all started off as a collection of bulbs that I bought from Woolworths. 40 watt, 60 of the same variety.
Very Nimmo challenge.
Anticipation.
You thought he was going to say what again? And he didn't say what again. You came in too soon, Derek, so Paul has another point. 17 seconds on bulbs, starting now.
I suppose my favourite bulb of all, when I come to think about it, is that simple bulb that you plant into the soil in spring. I can't remember its name offhand, but I know that if you water it and nurture and look after this peculiar little object...
He doesn't know the name, but he kept going on the subject till the whistle went, getting an extra point for doing so, and he's brought the show to an end because we have no more time. So the final situation was the points, I feel, are secondary to the entertainment they provided, and Peter gave his usual entertainment, finishing in 4th place. Stephen did much the same in 3rd place. Derek contributed always and got lots of points, which he loves to get. But out in the lead, a few points ahead of them all, was Paul Merton, so we say he's the winner. To thank our clever panellists, Paul Merton, Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones and Stephen Frost. Also Liz Trott for keeping the score and blowing her whistle so magnificently. For Ian Messiter for creating the game, keeping us in work. And Jobson for directing the show. And me, Nicholas Parsons, from all of us. Goodbye, hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll tune in the next time we take to the air for Just a Minute.